Welcome back to the program. So first and foremost, the store again is back up. Right now we have the brand new Cry Harder t-shirts in 14 different colors. We should have the Long Live the King t-shirt maybe by Monday or Tuesday of next week. And then I'm hearing that we're going to have hats back as well. So check it out on the Substack right up at the top. It says store. You can check it out and purchase some new merchandise. But we have had an amazing day today. President Trump has been liberated, literally, from the courts and from these injunctions, and we'll get into all of that in a second. But I just want to give a little bit of background here, okay? When President Trump was being thrown off of the ballots in Colorado and Illinois and all of these different states, everybody was freaking out. This was back in 2020, right? I said, guys, relax. He's going to be on the ballot, okay? There's no question he's going to be on the ballot. And again, I was correct. Remember when he did the first round of bans, right? Where he was banning people from certain countries and things like that. They called it the, quote, Muslim ban. But he was banning people from coming into the country. Everybody was freaking out when the court stepped in, the lower court stepped in, and they said, oh, no, you can't do that. And everyone was freaking out. And I said, relax, trust me, he'll be able to do that as well. He was, of course, able to do that. Now, there's been a whole bunch of other things that honestly I can't even remember, but there's been a lot of other things that I was correct on. Well, a lot of you, many of you, have been jumping off the bridge, basically, saying, oh my God, they're stopping the Trump agenda. Look at these judges. Look at these injunctions that are happening left and right. And yeah, it sucked. It sucked for a while, but what did I tell you all? I said, just relax. Don't worry about it. They are overstepping their boundaries. They are going after the executive branch. They are getting into the executive branch when they have no business to do so. This will all work out in the end at the Supreme Court. How many times did I walk you all off the ledge and let you know that? Well, clearly today was Vindication Day for President Trump, and more importantly, an opportunity to now put these injunctions, for the most part, completely behind us and move forward. Now, does that mean that there's not going to be rogue judges that are going to still try to file injunctions? Of course there will. There's still going to be interference, folks. This is President Trump. What did I always say, right? Rescue kittens from a burning building or cure cancer tomorrow, and they're still going to come after him. So again, you have to understand that. But you have to also understand that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And at the end of that marathon is a gold medal. Trust me on that. I've been correct, and I'm pointing that out as well. Now, I'm going to give you what I wrote on X as an example of everything that has kind of happened. But before I do that, I want to play this video of President Trump today, gloating, shall we say, which he should, and having a lot of victories to talk about. So let's listen here and see what he's got to say.
Thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was in...
How many times did we do roundtables on Full Throttle Thursday going through and discussing that? Now, again, that case has not been brought to the Supreme Court yet, okay? They have not made a decision 100% on that. But as I said, it is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Will they rule in that case correctly? Gosh, I hope so. But this other case that they ruled that we'll talk about and get into was basically a prelude to that, okay? And the judges, in some respects, shocked even me, but certainly shocked the administration because they've already narrowed that focus. So there's a better, I'd say at least 50-50, if not maybe even a 60-40% chance that they will gut at least some of the birthright citizenship clause. So we'll see what happens. But here, continuing.
In fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people.
So there it is. This was a big, big, big day for the Supreme Court. Now, I have said numerous times that Amy Coney Barrett doesn't like President Trump. There's a clear disdain. There's no question about it. But I also said in a lot of those Full Throttle Thursdays when we were discussing it, yeah, she may have a animus towards the president for whatever the reason is. I can't understand why. I mean, he gave her a lifetime appointment on the bench, but I digress. But I also said she likely loves the country more, and she will be able to put that bias or hatred or vitriol or disdain or whatever it is behind her. And she has been able to do that. Now, I will say this. When it comes to social conservatism and the social issues, Barrett, Gorsuch, Alito, Thomas, and quite frankly, for the most part, even Roberts have been very good on those things. It's the other things that they're not good on, right? Election stuff. They're not good on fiscal stuff for the most part. And so they do have their pluses and their minuses. And overall, we're not going to get every decision, but we're going to get the ones that I believe are the most important. And clearly today, at the end of their term, showed that. Okay? So here's what I said ultimately about this injunction decision, and I put this on X today. So here's what I got. The Supreme Court's decision on limiting nationwide injunctions in the birthright citizenship case sets legal precedent. That is important. This means that now there is a baseline criteria set forth that should limit these actions moving forward substantially by rogue lower court judges. However, the court did leave open and, quite frankly, even encouraging from the language of their ruling, Coney majority decision opinion, that dissenting parties can still sue to have the right to file class action lawsuits instead. So what does this mean? Well, they've taken away the nationwide injunction, and they have replaced it with the ability for the dissenting folks, so the Democrats in this case, and the left, whatever, to file class action lawsuits. But it's not so simple, all right? It's not so simple. This was a huge win, but I am going to break it all down. I have no legal background, none whatsoever, so I'll do my best. Perhaps I can be corrected, but just by going with common sense, knowing the law as much as I do, even though I don't have a background, and have been studying this stuff for years, and knowing the ins and outs of the courts and knowing what powers are, situated within each branch and all that stuff, I've been able to make these correct decisions. So here's what I put. However, let's examine this option that was left. And quite frankly, this is a good option. And let me explain why. Because one day, God forbid, we may be in the minority again. And if we have a radical leftist president, God forbid, we want to be able to at least have the ability to litigate. We won't be able to do nationwide injunctions anymore because that is pretty much off the table now. And rightfully, it should be. Now, it works for us, right, in the majority. But if, God forbid, we're in the minority, well, now we're going to be in a much tougher position. But let's not worry about that right now. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. So, number one, class action lawsuits, okay? Number one, they're very difficult to even file, let alone win. They involve meeting certain thresholds and highly intricate legal rules and requirements, including the extremely tall task of demonstrating that a large enough group of people have been affected. And if they have been affected, they have been injured by the plaintiffs in this litigation. Number two, the court must now also determine that the case meets, there's that famous word again, standing, right? Pennsylvania versus Texas. The Supreme Court punted and said, oh, you didn't have any standing. Meanwhile, we had 21 states of standing, but I digress. So class action lawsuits are very difficult to even file, let alone win. They involve meeting that threshold of high, intricate legal rules and requirements, including the tall task of demonstrating that a large enough group of similarly affected individuals have been injured by the plaintiffs in the litigation. Number two, the court must determine that the case meets standing just to even have the right to file the lawsuit, which in most class action suits kills the suit completely. Paradoxically, if the plaintiffs can even meet that specific criteria for a class action lawsuit, then they will also have to additionally meet size requirements of the number of potential victims injured in order to warrant a single lawsuit. And number three, even if a class action lawsuit meets the requirement to be filled, winning them is just as tough, and collecting on them is just as difficult as well. If a settlement is somehow reached, a fairness hearing is held to ensure that its terms are fair to all parties involved. Additionally, these types of cases typically take years to settle at the appellate and appeals process, and they can be significantly delayed, which means restitution, damage, and payouts are delayed not by months, but by years. So that's the skinny. The court just significantly curtailed activist judges' ability to interfere with the executive branch. And as a result, we should be seeing a heck of a lot less of these nationwide injunctions, if any at all. So I wanted to break it down and explain it because Trump isn't doing that. He's running around saying, we won, it's great, and it's true, but I wanted to show, how the meal is made behind the scenes from a legal precedent standpoint. I think that's important. Now, Supreme Court did hand President Trump major wins today. How times have changed. 5 years ago, many legal advocates for the LGBTQ issues were pleasantly surprised when Justice Neil Gorsuch authored the majority opinion in Bostock versus Clayton County, joined by four liberals and four liberal justices on the court at that time, which held that a federal civil rights law protects individuals who are gay or transgender from employment discrimination. The term may have provided something of a reality check. This term, Gorsuch was in the 6-3 conservative supermajority, both in the ruling earlier this month in Skermety versus Tennessee law that banned gender-affirming medical care for transgendered minors, as well as today's ruling in what is known as Mahmoud, I guess. So let's see. So the organization representing immigrants fighting President Donald Trump's birthright citizenship order wasted little time seeking to recalibrate its legal strategy to block the president's policy, again, through the nationwide class action lawsuit way. So they're not going to be able to do a nationwide injunction because the court kicked that out, but they can try, if they wanted, to do a class action. So we'll have to see what happens. Now, the Supreme Court also kicked or punted on a very important House redistricting case in Louisiana. And what they have done is this was a redistricting that favored Republicans. Well, the Democrats in that area said because of the larger black population in this parish, we should be able to rewrite the rules basically and change the district to make extra seats in Louisiana for Democrats. Okay? Well, at this time, the court did not take up that case, but they are likely to do it sometime either right before 2026 and hopefully rule correctly that in favor of Republicans, but if not, it won't likely be until after 2026. So that's another one that they kicked on. So we'll have to see. And then, of course, the Supreme Court did the opt-out for LGBTQ parents. And so if there is a school that is showing a video or pushing an assignment or doing, I don't know, a book research or book report or whatever it might be, and the parents object to the material for their children to see, now there is an opt-out where the schools want to control the narrative. They want to indoctrinate these kids. They don't want the parents involved in the process at all. Many of them say, we own your children for 8 hours a day. You can have them when they come home. Yeah, you don't even want them when they come home because they're little mindless socialist drones, a la Mandani, if you saw my article. Okay? So that's really, really good because this means that now there is an opt-out for parents, which wasn't there before. And then I think there was one or two other decisions. Let me see here. What was the other one? There was another decision. Well, the birthright citizenship one, obviously, is the one that everyone is talking about. The Obamacare decision could presage another win for Trump on vaccines. The opinion preserves the administration's executive power-focused defense of the law. So the court, in their decision in Kennedy versus Braidwood Management, elected to preserve a portion of the Affordable Care Act, as I've always called it, directed towards coverage of certain preventive services, embracing the Trump administration's executive power-focused defense of the law. Believe it or not, I think they were actually focused on defending part of the law as an aspect of arguments that concern public health and different groups. In his opinion, conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh affirmed that the Health and Human Services Secretary has the authority to both appoint U.S. Preventive Services Task Force members and remove them at will when a, quote, task force member makes a decision that the secretary disagrees with. The secretary can also block a recommendation by slow-walking its implementation, since Congress only requires a minimum of 1 year interval between its issuance and mandatory insurance coverage, he wrote. So that was another interesting case as well. I guess you could call that a win. And then there's this. The Supreme Court upheld the Texas law requiring age verification for pornographic websites. And again, I think that's wonderful. We're protecting children, right? This isn't a free speech issue. If you're a minor, you can't consent. So if you're going to get on one of those platforms, you shouldn't be able to be on those platforms, and you should be able to not be able to see any of the content and material. So that's a good one too. That's definitely a good win. And then I think there might have been, was there another one? Let me see here. Let's see. No, I think that might have been it. Yeah. There was a couple of, I think, some other minor ones. Congress-sized changes to the FCC fund survives. So today's win for the Federal Communications Commission means it will be business as usual for millions of people who rely on the agency's Universal Service Fund for access to telephone and broadband services. Even though the Supreme Court declined to disturb the fund, Congress could still move to tweak it or overhaul it. So again, they punted that one back to Congress. And I think, was there any more? Let's see if there's anything else. Not really, not too much. But anyway, so I wanted to kind of just point some of those things out because I think it's important to know that the injunctions should, if not completely disappear, they should be a hell of a lot less, and they should be easier to overturn because the Supreme Court has now set legal precedent. So I don't know what the left is going to do. I mean, they don't really listen to the Supreme Court as it is. And so we had that rogue judge just 2-3 days ago come out and say, I don't care what the Supreme Court says. And now they're getting smacked down as well. So I don't know. We're going to have to see what happens. But today was indeed a very, very good day for President Trump, for the administration, and of course, for all of our freedom. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.